Cowboys Overtime here on StarTelegram.com, brought to you by our friends at Window Nation. I am Fort Worth Star Telegram columnist Mac Engel. A very handsome-looking gentleman on the other side of your screen is Mr. Nick Harris. Cowboys know it all.
You keep
Cowboys,
calling me handsome. You're going to have to take me out on a dinner sometime, Mac.
yeah, I'm fine with it. If you want to pay for it, that's fine. I'll go with anybody who's going to pick up the check. That's cool. I'm down. You just tell me a time and place. And no, I take that back. That's a lie. That's not time and place. I will name the place. You name the time, and then you'll pick up the check. Is that fair?
Fair enough.
Did you ever, by the way, did you ever figure out, we have at the Fort Worth Star Telegram, the most complicated expense filing system. Apparently, students at MIT, Caltech, Berkeley, Georgia Tech, and Harvard were unable to navigate it. They just gave up, like it can't be done. Nick, I know you're relatively new to the Fort Worth Star Telegram. Have you been able to go through this maze and labyrinth of buttons and pages to properly file your expense reports?
So actually, it is next on my agenda after we get done with this podcast here. Fortunately, Tuesdays are the days where no one's in the building here at the Star in Frisco, so I can kind of get some things done in that kind of realm. And fortunately, our producer Candy said there's a video on how to use it, so I'm going to be set up for success here.
That's good optimism. Yes, there is a video on how to use it. I've tried it.
Okay.
I've also used videos on how to fix my toilet. That one was easier than this one.
That gives me great hope.
Yeah. So you could have $3.5 million in expenses that you need to file. There's a 50-50 chance it may not go through. So
Noted.
Godspeed, God be with you. And I'm just going to tell you, just be patient. Just
Noted.
be like, think Job. Every time you're doing this, think Job. What would Job do?
Yeah.
And that might give you a shot. All right. The Dallas Cowboys did not play on Sunday, and surprisingly, they didn't even come away with a blowout loss. The Cowboys were in the bye week, which gives us a chance to lick our wounds and pontificate just exactly what in the hell was Jerry Jones thinking this time a week ago when he went on with his local radio show to basically put the announcers and hosts in their place to say, hey, guys, I don't need these kinds of questions from the station that is the flagship station. I can find anybody to ask me questions that aren't going to be this hard. So you and myself and a whole bunch of people in sports media wondered aloud, what in the hell is he doing? It's embarrassing, etc. I had some conversations with the guys who work there, and we all came to the same conclusion that when he came on the show again, that it would be water under the bridge and no big deal, and that he might even apologize. Well, Jerry Jones this morning did make his regularly scheduled appearance on 105.3 The Fan with the hosts and basically said, I don't know what the big deal is. He didn't say, I'm not going to apologize, but he didn't apologize. And that my favorite part, it is a privilege to interview, to have on the station, Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and Mike McCarthy. Although I was not sure he is aware that Mike McCarthy does a show on that station. Nick, I'm not entirely surprised by this next chapter in this little squabble. He did make sure to say that he enjoys coming on those shows, that showing emotion is not a bad thing. I kind of agree with that. And that this, my impression is, this will kind of be forgotten. There are some takeaways that I have from this latest episode.
Yep.
I wanted your takeaway from what was a very interesting week of nothing and yet significant, I would say change, not even changes, just significant realities that exist for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. What was necessarily the question there?
What were your takeaways from this last week?
Yeah.
Like what now that it's done, what did you take away from it?
Yeah, I think overall, you're looking at a team that is starting to do a lot of self-evaluating, I think a little bit earlier in the season than they anticipated. Granted, Mike McCarthy, he likes to break up the season in trimesters, 6 games, 5 games. The bye week kind of works out where he can kind of look at the first trimester holistically during the bye week and kind of take that approach into the second trimester, if you will. But I think overall, I think there was more self-reflecting, more self-evaluating, more looking in the mirror here in week 7, or I guess last week in week 7, than they anticipated having. And I think You look at that and you come back with what Mike McCarthy had to say yesterday, with what Jerry Jones had to say this morning. And Jerry Jones said this morning, there's bad concepts and bad plays being run offensively. You look at what Mike McCarthy said yesterday, and they are trying to rectify different practice situations, which we'll get into later, but also trying to figure out what will work offensively, what can work defensively until they get some guys back from injury. How much of their problems can be solved by getting some of these guys back that are injured? Probably, a fair share. But I think still at the end of the day, you look at it, there needs to be more execution on both sides for this team to even crack the playoffs, much less win in the playoffs.
Nick, we're going to flip-flop topics here because you mentioned something that is a better segue rather than the other one I had, and that is self-evaluation. We've heard a lot of talk about the Cowboys, a lot of criticisms that really began back, I would say, in March, around the time free agency began, that they didn't necessarily address what were glaring needs that were revealed by the Green Bay Packers in that embarrassing playoff loss back in January to wrap up their season. It was embarrassing. And you saw what the problems were, and you and I and so many other people said, you've got to address it here, here, here. And they didn't. Or if they did, they really didn't do enough of a job that would make you say, okay, we think you have made an upgrade there or filled in that hole adequately. And now we're seeing after a 3-3 start, which includes 2 utterly embarrassing home losses. If you want to say a third one of the Ravens, okay, go ahead. But they made the score look presentable at least. But one thing we consistently heard now are practice habits, that this team's not practicing hard enough. Mike McCarthy says we're not practicing, I guess, efficiently enough. And then former Cowboys quarterback and current Fox analyst Troy Aikman comes on a local radio show, 1310 The Ticket, and destroys the Cowboys wide receivers route running and basically their effort on the line. Troy basically says CeeDee Lamb's not running good routes. None of these guys are coming off the line looking like they want it unless they know the ball is coming their way. Troy is not afraid to be honest. Troy played in the NFL for a long time. And if you go back and watch it, and even when I was watching the games in real time, Nick, I would see CeeDee Lamb and say, man, that doesn't look good. It's not bad, but it doesn't look good, especially in light of the contract they just gave him. Mike McCarthy gets a little defensive. Kevontae Turpin is very defensive. Jerry Jones is a little bit more understanding. Where do you sit on all of this? What to me comes down to effort questions.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the question that was coming out of the loss to the Baltimore Ravens. You were talking about in the locker room with a lot of these guys. They were talking about details. They were talking about intention. They were talking about purpose, things like that. And that directly coincides with effort. And I think whenever you look at the receiving question in particular and what Troy had to say specifically, I don't think everything that he said was put necessarily on the receivers. I think there's a play calling aspect to this as well. This is not a complex offense from a route running perspective. Their route tree is very limited. It's a lot of in-breaking routes that'll go across the field, getting guys out in space. And then that's when you start factoring in the wide receiver effort on the side of things, because those guys, they need to be able to cross across the field. They need to be able to cross the formation. And if these guys are not doing it in sync at the same pace, then that entire passing offense is going to be out of rhythm. And that's what we've seen. That's what we saw against Detroit. And I think early on in the Detroit game, you go back and look at the all-22, that secondary was throwing physicality on those Cowboys receivers. And what happened as soon as the second quarter hit, those receivers were not giving that much fight back. And so what happens whenever that kind of translates into the second half? The passing offense is out of rhythm. Dak starts throwing interceptions because he's anticipating guys being in specific spots when they are not actually there. It all kind of wraps up into one issue. And so if you're looking at it, you're the 49ers secondary and you're looking at film from the Cowboys from the first 6 weeks, you're looking at it, the solution is easy. Just throw physicality onto these receivers, and they're not going to be able to fight through it and create some separation. And that's been the biggest harp, I think, on this offense going into the second trimester.
So since we're on a pregnancy curve and we've got a baby due, which right on track now, by the first week of January, this is going to be one hell of an ugly baby. So the thing that struck me during that Lions game, not so much the Baltimore game, because Baltimore, they didn't quit. And quitting is a 4-letter word in an NFL locker room or any pro sports locker room. That that is an indictment. When you say, dude, you quit, that's about as bad as it can get. You can call him a bad dad, bad husband, bad brother, bad whatever. You call him a quitter, that one's going to get you in trouble.
Which one's worse, quit or soft?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. Wow. To me, in my very humble experience of being around this stuff, I remember when I think I might have been younger than you, and I was a beat writer, so they saw me all the time. This was a hockey team. This was the Stars, and I had written that they quit. I don't think I've ever, it's not that big of a deal, but the coach said it to me in private. And I know why he did it now. He wanted me to write it because he knew the players and their family members would read it.
Yeah.
So I wrote, they quit. It was like February. It was a nothing game, but he's a head coach and you've got to have your thumb on those guys. Otherwise, they will mail it in, right?
Yeah.
So I write that they quit. Oh, that did not go over well.
You got thrown under the bus.
No, yeah, that was not. Oh no, it was okay. I mean, it helped. It was a good long range decision for me. But I heard about it, which is you can't say that, blah blah blah. But it woke them up. I mean, it served the coach's purpose because they're different animals. Soft means you're not going to get in there and fight. Yep. And that was the part that bothered me so much about that game against Detroit. And look, Nick, Detroit's one of the top 3 teams in the NFL right now. They are rolling. But the part that dispirited me as a Cowboys observer is they just look flat demoralized.
Yeah.
Like, even if they tried, they're going to get their asses handed to them. Pardon my French. So I think there's kind of a blurred line between soft and quitting. I don't think they quit because they're 3-3. I think the biggest problem is they're just not quite good enough. They're good enough to be 3-3. So they've beaten some bad teams. They're not one of those teams. So, okay, you've got something to work with. It's not like they're 1-5 or anything like that. There is something there because they've been erratic. And if you're erratic, that means something good is in there. Well, they got to do a hell of a lot more of it. And to me, I don't think that they just look demoralized. And I'm not trying to duck the question about it, but I think some of those guys, Trayvon Diggs, I'm sorry, man. The video doesn't lie. That was a soft player.
Yeah.
And maybe he's afraid of getting hurt. He never really liked contact anyways. But, dude, you got to show up. I'm sorry. Those guys are just running at you deliberately because they know you do not want to stick your head in there. That's the job. And if you can't do it, get off the field. But
when you're a 6'1.5", 6'2" corner pushing over 200 pounds, you should be able to be that boundary presence if teams want to run your way. And we have Trayvon Diggs, one of his biggest knacks is that he's not a tackler. But when you have a big corner like that, you pay him with the sense that he can be physical, not only in coverage, but also stepping up in the run game. So, yeah, that's a perfect example.
So you asked me, what do you think? I don't see quit. Quit is the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
That's quit. But Cowboys, I see now I don't see a confident team at all.
I don't see quit, but I see soft. I do. And
how do you define that? How do you define soft?
I think it's just these guys are not physical enough at the point of attack. You see them getting pushed off the ball, off the line of scrimmage on both sides at times, but more so specifically on the defensive line. And I said it this morning on a different show. I think I was fooled. As a young evaluator, I am learning a lesson here in the sense that I thought all of their problems would be solved by creating depth in that linebacking core from a rush defense perspective, because I look at last year's problems, right? Run defense against Green Bay, Buffalo, Miami, Arizona, 49ers, all of these losses that they took last season. You look at the rush defense and the linebackers are just getting blown off into the third level at times because they only had one healthy linebacker, and it was Damone Clark, a guy who can barely get on the field this year. So they get depth. They bring in Eric Kendricks. They draft Maris Lewis-Fowl. They get DeMarvion Overshown back from injury. I mean, they throw depth into that second level. And I was fooled. I was say, okay, then their run defense is going to be heavily improved. They're bringing in a Mike Zimmer, a guy who, emphasizes discipline, emphasizes fight. But it doesn't matter if what you have up front is not getting the job done. And that's exactly what's happening here. And how much has injury been a part of that? Maybe a little. But even when these guys were healthy, that front was not playing well. And when I talk about the front, I'm talking specifically right down the middle and Mozzie Smith and also Digizua. I mean, both of these guys, they have to be better. And Jonathan Hankins at times last year was good, yes, but it's not like he would have been this be-all, save-all this year if he was in the middle of that defensive line too. I don't feel like he was even bringing that level of play last year that you could have in the middle this year and still feel good about it. So in that sense, I look at Mozzie Smith and I'm saying, hey, man, you're the first-round pick. You got to be able to step up. They let this veteran go so that you can step up into this role, and he's not doing that. And I think that comes with the title of soft for this defense, because they are allowing 557 rushing yards in a 3-game span, which is just unreal. And that only plays towards physicality. This team has to be more physical. It goes right back to what I said about the receivers earlier on the offensive side of the ball. All the secondary had to do for Detroit was throw a little bit of fight into the receivers, flick them around a little bit, and then they were out. They were out of the game, and that completely threw the passing offense out of rhythm. And it's not like they have a rushing offense that can compensate for that.
All right, it's a lot of optimism there by Nick Harris. All right, we got more to talk about here on Cowboys Overtime, but first we're going to hear from our great friends at Window Nation.
Window Nation, the star of window replacement and proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys, can help you fill the house this season with savings. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and make no interest payments for 60 months, 5 full years. Fill your house for a customized authentic Dallas Cowboys jersey while supplies last. You could even help fill the Cowboys house and win tickets to a game. Visit windownation.com/Cowboys now for details. Call 866-95-NATION. Window Nation, proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Thank you very much, Window Nation. Can't believe you're still with us, given the state of the Dallas Cowboys. I am Fort Worth Star-Telegram columnist Mac Engel. He's Nick Harris out of the Star in Frisco for another episode of Cowboys Overtime. Got a couple more topics here before we wrap this up. The first one is, will the Cowboys, can you envision a scenario where the Cowboys are not criticized for passing on and not even trying to sign then Tennessee Titans free agent running back Derrick Henry, who is now in Baltimore and pursuing Eric Dickerson's NFL all-time season rushing record?
Yeah, we cannot keep going with this cap excuse for Derrick Henry. The man signed a 2-year, $16 million deal. That was something that the Cowboys could still afford to this day. And it's you see the benefits that Baltimore is getting in return for that, and it's only just helping power that offense to be a bigger juggernaut than they were beforehand. They went into that game against Tampa Bay last night, and I thought Tampa Bay would win that game because Tampa Bay's been playing strong. They have a really good offense. Granted, they lose Mike Evans, I believe, on the second drive, but they were on their home field. They had a lot to play for. And Baltimore ran them out of the building. The final score didn't quite show that. There was some garbage time points there, but Baltimore handled that game, and it was a big part of what Derrick Henry had, 169 yards. He broke off an 82-yard run that really just kind of put the fork in him. That's a player, and that's a guy that they could have afforded.
The only part to it that I thought I agreed with, because he was 30 years old, was by December, it was the player that we're seeing now. Those guys are vulnerable. They just are. And he has looked fantastic. So clearly we have to get to that part of the schedule where my part of that justification for not even looking at him may play out, unfortunately, because I'm playing odds of the older guys, and they just slow down in December and January. And
we've seen that from Henry.
For sure. And look, these wins in the early part of the regular season, well, they count just as much as they do in December. But the one part of this that's also being argued from Jerry Jones and others is that Derrick Henry would not be having specifically this season that he's having in Baltimore that he would with the Cowboys. I agree with that.
Yeah,
because the offense is different. But the part to me that is just brain dead, like drunk deniability, stupid, is the fact that he would not be a significant upgrade over what they have now.
Yeah. There was a tweet yesterday that I replied to, and it was asking, would Derrick Henry be as effective in the Dallas Cowboys offense as he's been for Baltimore? The answer is no, absolutely not. That is a running team, and they have built their identity around running the ball over the course of the last 3-4 years. And the reason they didn't have it, with them not having a running back, is the reason I don't think that they've been able to get over the hump. But you look at the Cowboys offense, it's still a top 10 rushing offense if Derrick Henry is on that team.
Totally.
Granted, the offensive line, there's probably a lot more questions on the offensive line for Dallas than there is at Baltimore. But Baltimore is still starting a rookie at tackle, just like the Cowboys. Granted, they're not starting 2 rookies, but they are still figuring out things up front themselves. no one creates something out of nothing like Derrick Henry. And there was a crack toss to the right in that game against Tampa Bay last night that went nowhere. He bounced back to the left and picked up 14 yards.
Yeah.
That's longer than any carry that the Cowboys have had all season. So, I mean,
is that right?
I believe that, or I think Rico Dowdle got to 15 against
Detroit. He got to 15 against Pittsburgh. Yeah, that was beautiful. That was a thing of beauty.
And that was against Detroit. That was in garbage time.
That wasn't against Pittsburgh?
12. Yeah, he got it to 12.
The real highlight against the Detroit Lions when they lost 47-9 was a 15-yard run. All right, let's move on. The Cowboys play on Sunday night on NBC's Sunday Night Football against a team that 5 weeks ago, that anybody would have said, holy cow, they're going to blow out the Cowboys. However, there probably has not been a more disappointing team so far here in the 2024 season, more than the San Francisco 49ers. This was a team that went to the Super Bowl last year, and they do not look like a Super Bowl team at present. They're 3-4. Now, they are 4.5-point favorites against the Cowboys. That line has dropped because they have so many significant injuries. Running back Christian McCaffrey is out. Deebo Samuel, their versatile wide receiver, has pneumonia, probably will play. Brandon Ayuk, their talented wide receiver, out for the season. Their linebacker, Dre Greenlaw, is likely out for Sunday's game against the Cowboys. And tight end George Kittle has a sprained foot. He is questionable. I would imagine he would play. When you and I talked about this game last week, I gave the Cowboys a puncher's chance, just saying, you know what, you never know. It wouldn't surprise me if they go out there, play them close, and they pulled one out on some 78-yard Brandon Aubrey field goal. I feel better about it now. What are your thoughts?
I do have this strange confidence around the Cowboys in this game. And another injury that I think is also playing a role in how the 49ers have started their season is Talanoa Hufanga. Their safety has been out, and they've had to play a rookie from Wake Forest, sounds familiar, and Malik Mustafa in that third level. So I think when you factor in all the injuries that the 49ers are dealing with right now, the healthiest skill guy that they have was shot in the chest 2 months ago. That's how banged up that they are.
Terrible. And he came back the other day. He had a catch. He got a standing ovation. It's amazing.
It is a cool story, and he's a great talent. He's a great talent. I really liked him coming out of Florida. But I think whenever you look at it on paper, and that's the reality, you have to have confidence if you're the Cowboys. And you're dealing with a banged-up defense. You might get Deron Bland back. You're expected to get Eric Kendricks back. Micah Parsons, I don't think is going to be a go for this game, but you still have a defensive line that, at times has looked all right without him in the lineup. I think when you factor all that in, they should have a fighter's chance, a lot more than they had last year when they went up there and lost 42-10.
I'm picking them to win. If you look at Mike McCarthy, I'm picking them to win straight up. If you look at McCarthy's record after the bye, it's really good. And I'm with you. I just think San Francisco's caught in one of those seasons. You've seen it with good teams, and it just doesn't go your way. And I think they're in the middle of that right now.
You know what? I'm gonna regret this, but I'm gonna go with you, Mac. I think the Cowboys win this game.
Most people who go with me usually regret it. All right, we're gonna change gears here for a bit for our last topic. I don't know if you've noticed this or not. I know you love football more than anybody, but the state of Texas college football is really good right now. Yeah, I know Texas lost. Number one, Texas lost on Saturday night against Georgia. It's a really good game. It was an amazing atmosphere, and I know the UT fans embarrassed themselves. They even got scolded by their minister of fun, Matthew McConaughey. But and obviously SMU's having a terrific year. Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, kind of middling. But the one that's really rolling and nobody is noticing it are the Texas A&M Aggies. Aggies are 6-1 and 4-0 under first-year coach Mike Elko. They lost their first game of the season at home against Notre Dame. It was pretty ugly. Things didn't look good. He kept them together. They won at Florida, which was a really kind of a toss-up game, and they have played extremely well ever since that loss to Notre Dame. On Saturday night, they host number 8 LSU. If they can, now right now they're a 2.5-point favorite, which means that's kind of a coin toss. LSU has bedeviled them really since they joined the SEC. They've got the quarterback who can play. He's not great, but he can play. The defense is really good. That front seven is really good.
Yes.
I hate to say this because I've killed the Aggies in the past because they've earned it. I'm believing in this team. Oof. And I think that game at the end of November when they host Texas, and the game the Aggies never wanted to play, which is going to be worth $1 billion. I think A&M can win. I think they can. I think they can be. Everybody's sleeping on them, and I know the A&M always disappoints their fan base and everybody else. And I'm going to get killed for this. I think they can do it. Do you?
I think it really does depend on that quarterback and Connor Wigman. Not only his health, but how he plays.
Yeah.
I think with LSU coming into town this weekend, this is the biggest game they've had all season. I don't believe they've played anybody. They beat Bowling Green by 7. They beat Arkansas by 4. Yes, they blew out a top 10 Missouri team, but that Missouri team is starting to show that they are not as talented as they were a year ago. They have big quarterback problems in my eyes.
You don't like Brady Cook?
I'm not a huge fan at all. I think he's been the biggest problem towards Missouri not living up to the expectation this year. But I think whenever you look at the Texas A&M case, if they can beat LSU this weekend, I'm in. I'm not in until they can beat a team that I.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, you can make. I don't think anybody could argue against those points because the thing that I like, if Connor Wegman, who has shown the ability to play and make big time throws, and talk about tough, if he can play well. That defense, and specifically that front four, and they finally have a decent offensive line, that's going to give them a chance. Now, I don't, I know this has been a program that has disappointed you, but I had every expectation. If this was your typical A&M team, they were going to go to Mississippi State last week and lose. And they didn't, because they always lose those kind of games. They always lose to Ole Miss when they shouldn't. They lose to Mississippi State when they shouldn't, or Kentucky or Missouri or whatever else. And they haven't lost that game. So I think this is a confident team. I think they're finally, for the first time, I don't think there are issues in that room. I'd heard that for a long time, and I think they can do it. All right.
I'll say this. I'll say this about their defense.
Yeah.
Defense, I going into the year, I felt like they were a top 10 defense in the country. They are living up to that. You got the Shamars on the inside, and Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart. Nick Skowerton on the edge, who's going to be a first-round pick. Torian York in that second level, who's a tackling machine. Secondary. Jimbo Fisher did an awesome job investing into that defense and recruiting guys that can get in there and start day one. Those guys not only got in there and started day one, but now you're starting to reap the benefits of them having the experience from day one. And Mike Elko, he was there for the beginning and now he's there for the end. I think he's going to end up reaping the rewards from that defense for sure.
Okay, last question. Huge game on Saturday night, Texas and Vanderbilt. Texas is a top 10 team. Vanderbilt is ranked 25th in the nation, has knocked off Alabama, almost had Missouri in the bag. Who do you like? Nashville. People just don't go to Nashville and win. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just don't go to Nashville and win. They do have a decent quarterback. Texas, will they rebound and beat a scrappy Vanderbilt team?
Yeah, well, Georgia State went to Nashville earlier in the season and won, so I think Texas does the same thing.
That's good. When you're in the same category of Georgia State, you know you've made it. Okay, Cowboys, 49ers, a battle of two bad injured teams on Sunday night in Santa Clara. My friend Nick Harris is going to be there for all of your Cowboys coverage needs. Be sure to check us out on StarTelegram.com. Thank you, Window Nation. Thank you, Candy Bolden. We will see all of you beautiful people next week.